Alright guys, so I'm doing this impromptu video simply because some of the stuff I've come across today I think requires it. So despite my schedule being so hectic, I think we need to break this down. As I'm sure you've heard at some point today, since it's been everywhere I think, the FBI has decided to label Trump's Maga supporters, the Maga army, as potential domestic terrorists and launch investigations into each individual. But my question is, who's the real terrorist? Let's look into that real quick. Okay, guys, there's been a lot of people reporting on this, the self-styled, independent journalists and things of that nature, some of them right-leaning, some of them left-leaning. But I wanted to go to the original source, which is Newsweek magazine, and I also went the extra mile and reached out to a few people that I know that we've worked with in the past that are connected to the FBI to ask if this was factual. And even though they couldn't give me an official statement due to their NDAs and things of that nature that they are under since they're currently contracted with the FBI, they did pretty much tell me an emphatic yes that this was accurate. So we're going to dive into it a little bit, and I'm going to run my mouth some. The federal government believes that the threat of violence and major civil disturbances around the 2024 U.S. presidential election is so great that it has quietly created a new category of extremists that it seeks to track and counter. Donald Trump's army, quote, of MAGA followers. Yeah. You read that right. The challenge for the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the primary federal agency charged with law enforcement, that's laughable, is to pursue and prevent what it calls domestic terrorism without direct reference to political parties or affiliations, even though the vast majority of its current, quote, anti-government investigations are of Trump supporters, according to classified data obtained by Newsweek. That's called political persecution. Just, throwing that out there. Just saying. That's what dictators do. The FBI is in an almost impossible position, says a current FBI official who requested anonymity to discuss highly sensitive internal materials. The official said that the FBI is intent on stopping domestic terrorism and any repeat of the January 6, 2021 attack on the Capitol. Yet, you notice they don't mention the May 29th attack done by Antifa and BLM, in which one of the guard posts in the White House was set on fire. Part of the fence was taken down. Trump actually had to be locked in one of the underground bunkers beneath the White House. A church was burned to the ground. Multiple stores were looted. Cars were set on fire. But, I guess it's just okay for them since they're obviously a protected class. I guess it's okay. Man, boy, the real threat are those little old ladies that they've arrested and tried and charged with trespassing and all kinds of other stuff on January 6th that were let in to the Capitol by, the Capitol Police. Yeah, that tracks. Makes perfect sense. But the Bureau must also preserve the constitutional right of all Americans to campaign, speak freely, and protest the government by focusing on former President Trump and his MAGA supporters, the official said. The Bureau runs the risk of provoking the very anti-government activists that the terrorism agencies hope to encounter. Right. So you taking all their names from social media and the voters' ballots without a warrant, without any sort of due process. That's not a violation of our constitutional rights at all, is it? Hmm. Especially at a time when the White House is facing congressional Republican opposition claiming that the Biden administration has weaponized the Bureau against the right wing, it has to tread very carefully, says the official. Uh, why is weaponized even in quotes? You know it's true. Stop the doublespeak. Stop speaking out of the side of your mouth, you putz. And what? Really? Oh, look, an FBI government shill. Another jackbooted thug lackey of a communist regime. I'm so shocked. Wow. I know that you're watching the screen right now, but if you could only see the amount of surprise on my face. Newsweek spoke to over a dozen current or former government officials who specialize in terrorism in a 3-month investigation to understand the current domestic security landscape and to evaluate what President Joe Biden's... Yeah, he's not the president. Sorry, I recognize no legitimate authority in that douchebag whatsoever, or his regime. Administration is doing about what it calls domestic terrorism. Most requested anonymity because they were not authorized to talk publicly, were reluctant to stray into partisan politics, or feared the repercussions of speaking frankly. Right, because if they show or speak publicly saying that what's being done is wrong, then they're going to be labeled a domestic terrorist. They're going to have their lives turn into a living nightmare, get fired from their jobs, not be able to provide for their family. Yeah, fear is the rule of the day. As a matter of fact, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have a Sesame Street moment and say, fear is the word of the day. Elmo says fear. Okay, sorry, that was cheesy, but I had to. All right, Newsweek has also reviewed secret FBI and Department of Homeland Security data that track incidents, threats, investigations, and cases to try to build a better picture. While experts agree that the current partisan environment is charged and uniquely dangerous, with the threat not only of violence, but in the most extreme scenarios, possibly civil war, many also question whether terrorism is the most effective way to describe the problem, or that the methods of counterterrorism developed over the past decade in a response to Al-Qaeda and other Islamist groups constitute the most fruitful way to craft domestic solutions. Let me tell you this. You want to craft a domestic solution? Arrest Biden, arrest his entire regime, and arrest every single politician that has sold us out, sold us down the road, and committed treason. Try them for treason, and then punish them accordingly as per the Constitution. You want to correct the course? That's your only way to do it. Anyways, I digress. The political environment is not something that the FBI is necessarily responsible for, nor should it be, says Brian Michael Jenkins of one of the world's leading terrorism experts and senior advisor to the president of the RAND Corporation. Yeah, that should tell you a lot. In a statement to Newsweek, the FBI said the threat posed by domestic violent extremists is persistent, evolving, and deadly. You mean like BLM and Antifa? Oh, right. I keep forgetting they're a protected class of criminals, aren't they? That's right. Silly me. I always forget. Apparently they're off limits, and even if they do get arrested, the government and people like Kamala Harris just bail them out and let them go free. Yeah, man. I feel like such a fool. I totally forgot about that. Anyways, the FBI's goal is to detect and stop terrorist attacks, and our focus is on potential criminal violations, violence, and threats of violence. Anti-government or anti-authority violent extremism is one category of domestic terrorism, as well as one of the FBI's top threat priorities. The FBI further said, quote, We are committed to protecting the safety and constitutional rights of all Americans and will never open an investigation based solely on First Amendment protected activity, including a person's political beliefs or affiliations. I'm sorry, how many innocent people are rotting in jail right now because they refuse to testify and lie and say that Trump was the cause of Jan 6 and told them to do it? You know, how many of them are rotting in prison and being put in isolation, being starved and beaten and everything else? Yeah, lie much? The White House declined to comment. The Trump campaign was given an opportunity to comment, but did not do so. Why would they? Do you not see all the bull crap they're levying against the Trump family, trying to take their, shut down their companies and, steal their properties and everything else? Is it possible that it's all a political sideshow in order to, I don't know, set up another inevitable plot or plan to further destroy America? Maybe, but to be honest, that would require me opening an entire investigation and sitting down with Trump and his family and talking with them, speaking with his lawyers. It'd be a real headache. And to be honest, I'd much rather be saving the children and the human trafficking victims than dealing with it. So, I don't know, maybe someone else can take up that mantle for me. What the FBI data shows. From the president down, the Biden administration has presented Trump and Maga as an existential threat to American democracy and talked up the risk of domestic terrorism and violence associated with the 2024 election campaign. Quote, Donald Trump and MAGA Republicans are a threat to the very soul of this country. End quote. President Biden tweeted last September, the first time that he explicitly singled out the former president. Quote, MAGA Republicans aim to question not only the legitimacy of past elections, but elections being held now and into the future, Biden said. Right, because a man that hid in his basement for an entire campaign, barely spoke to anybody, got in certain people's faces, ran his mouth, touched little kids inappropriately, smelled their hair, and is a well-known pedophile, somehow magically turned out to have the most votes out of any president in history. I wonder. Biden's Homeland Security Advisor Liz Sherwood Randall said, the use of violence to pursue political ends is a profound threat to our public safety and national security. It is a threat to our national identity or our values, our norms, our rule of law, our democracy. Okay, then arrest every single politician, including Joe Biden and his entire family, that have committed treason. Arrest the Antifa people. Arrest BLM. Oh, but you won't do that, right, because you're bootlicking scum. Anyways, for Attorney General Merrick Garland, attacks by domestic terrorists are attacks on all of us collectively, aimed at rending the fabric of our democratic society and driving us apart. No, what he means is any actions that would be considered revolutionary in nature that would seek to correct the imbalance within our country and set it back on stable grounds would threaten their power, and they don't want to give up their power. It's just that simple. Shows a dip in the number of investigations since the slew of January 6 cases ended. FBI Director Christopher Wray still says that the breach of the Capitol building was not an isolated event, and the threat is not going away anytime soon. In a joint report to Congress this June, the Bureau of Department of Homeland Security say that threats from domestic violent extremists have increased in the last 2 years, and any further increases in threats likely will correspond to potential flashpoints such as high-profile elections and campaigns or contentious current events. Yeah. The FBI and DHS report concludes sociopolitical developments such as narratives of fraud In recent general election, the emboldening impact of the violent breach of the U.S. Capitol, conditions related to the COVID-19 pandemic, and conspiracy theories promoting violence will almost certainly spur some domestic terrorists to try to engage in violence. Yeah, how many Trump supporters have blown up buildings, looted stores, assaulted cops? I'm still waiting. Just saying. The threats listed in that paragraph are all clearly associated with America's right, and in particular with Trump's MAGA supporters. Really? I mean, really? You know, last time I checked, like we talked about May 29th and the George Floyd nonsense, it was Antifa and BLM that attempted to burn down the Capitol. So, which side is the violence coming from? I mean, really? Right after January 6th, the FBI co-authored a restricted report, Domestic Violent Extremists Emboldened in Aftermath of Capitol Breach, Elevated Domestic Terrorism Threat of Violence Likely Amid Political Transitions and Beyond, in which it shifted the definition of AGAAV, or AGAVI, anti-government, anti-authoritarian violent extremism, from furtherance of ideological agendas to furtherance of political and or social agendas. For the first time, such groups could be so labeled because of their politics. As I stated, this is political persecution. Nothing more, nothing less. It was a subtle change, little noticed, but a gigantic departure for the Bureau. Trump and his army of supporters were acknowledged as a distinct category of domestic violent extremists. Again, where's your examples? Even as the FBI was saying publicly that political views were never part of its criteria to investigate or prevent domestic terrorism. Really, is Islam not a political ideology? Not supporting it, not promoting it, just questioning. Where the FBI sees threats is also plain from the way it categorizes them, a system which, on the surface, is designed to appear nonpartisan, yet designed to appear that way. We all know the truth. This shifted subtly days after the events of January 6th when it comes to what the Bureau calls agave. We cannot and do not investigate ideology. Really? That's a shocking statement. A blatant, bold-faced lie. A senior FBI official reassured the press after January 6th. We focus on individuals who commit or intend to commit violence or criminal activity that constitutes a federal crime or poses a threat to national security. You know what? I'm sorry, I can't read the rest of this garbage because it's really going to make me even more furious than what I already am right now. So, having said that, let's move on to something else because I want to know who the real terrorists are, who the people who actually enslave the American people and people of other countries and sell them into trafficking and human, organ harvesting and all of that stuff are. So, you know what? Let's take a look at that because I want to know who the real terrorists are. Don't you? Having said that, we're going to move over to this particular article from News Target. Children being taken. Horrific video reveals U.S. government is actively facilitating a huge child trafficking ring across America. Now, this particular article is primarily based on what we see happening at the border with the migrant children and stuff like that. However, as you know, I've been doing a deep dive into the events and the missing children in Lahaina and Maui here recently and have uncovered some very disturbing things, such as military transport trucks being located in the area before the fires actually took place. What were they doing there? And where are the, 3,000 some odd missing children at? You know, I smell something and it stinks. We'll just put it that way. A disturbing expose shows how the U.S. federal government is supporting the world's biggest child trafficking ring with a steady stream of migrant children. Muckraker released a video on X showing unsettling footage of young children being placed in large vans with tinted windows as their shady escorts hid their name badges and instructed them not to speak to reporters. Unfortunately, these children's fate is a big mystery, and there are thousands more just like them who disappear in the U.S. on a regular basis. According to the publication, around 350,000 children enter the country unaccompanied every year, and 85,000 of those children have gone missing. And that's not counting the number of children that just magically go missing and are never pursued by law enforcement from foster care homes, which actually double up and run in the network of child trafficking and smuggling associations within the realm of the United States. Let's not forget that the U.S. is the biggest consumer of child pornography and child exploitation in the world. I just want you to let that sink in. Many are forced into a life of involuntary servitude, commercial sex trafficking, and other horrors that potentially include organ harvesting. Many of these children come from remote areas of South and Central America, not counting the actual American children that are taken, and those in Africa, India, Iraq, Afghanistan, Romania, Thailand, Russia. You know what? The list is just too extensive to actually go into. Anyways, while some children are lured from their villages by radio ads that tempt them with the idea of enjoying a better life in the U.S., other children are kidnapped or even sold to traffickers by their own parents. This is a fact. We've seen this. If I had it my way, they would be executed. But that is not for me to say unless God dictates so. The kids are tagged by the cartel trafficking them, and some are actually carried across the border incapacitated. Border Patrol often looks the other way and books them anyway. Some are given to the single adults who want to enter the U.S. to make them appear to be a family and improve their chances of getting into the country. They may be smuggled back into Mexico and then used for this purpose multiple times. And that doesn't even account to the rape and torture that they endure on the trail. Border Patrol must release unaccompanied children to the Department of Health and Human Services within 72 hours. And then they are relocated to orphanages, foster homes, and then I think the lowest estimate is some 400,000 of them are reported missing within the first year. Never looked for, never recovered. CPS has their hand in this as well. Anyways, as they wait to be processed and placed with a sponsor in the U.S., they are held in compounds run by government contractors that Muckraker likens to concentration camps. These centers can be found in places like Eagle Pass, El Paso, Los Fresnos, Carrizo Springs, and Pecos. Many of these compounds have guard towers, double fencing, floodlights, and other security features that seem very excessive for a place that is just holding children and has no nefarious connections. Agreed. Some children are also held in makeshift compounds and former shopping centers. For example, the NGO Southwest keeps children in former Walmart stores. Yes, they do. Unfortunately, this particular NGO has a horrible track record, including employees who have been charged with child molestation and sexual assault against children at their facilities. Oh, imagine that. One employee was sentenced to 19 years in prison after sexually abusing kids at the facility and exposing them to the HIV virus. Yet the NGO is still getting funding, receiving $770 million this year alone. That's because Biden, the Clintons, the Bushes, Obama, all of them are involved. All of them. Do you even know where half of the CIA's black budget money comes from? Child trafficking and organ harvesting. Not to mention illegal arms sales and drug trade. Migrant children's sponsors are often human traffickers. This is a fact. The Office of Refugee Resettlement is supposed to verify the identity of these children's sponsors, but records show they are failing miserably. Forged documents are not uncommon, and many sponsors are illegal aliens as well. Many children are sent to sponsors who are completely unrelated to them. True. And the process for vetting these sponsors was recently eased by the Biden administration. I wonder why that is. To reduce bottlenecks? No. He's making black market money off of this. Guarantee it. Impeach him, arrest him, try him for treason, and carry out the sentence that the Constitution prescribes. Background checks for some types of sponsors are no longer required, and many of these sponsors are actually human traffickers. Yes, this is a fact. A congressional report from 2016 acknowledged that the United States is a source, transit, and destination country for men, women, transgender individuals, and children, both U.S. citizens and foreign nationals, subjected to sex trafficking and forced labor. This is a fact. In addition, a report published last month by the DHS Office of Inspector General admitted that DHS may unknowingly release migrants, including children, to potentially unsafe conditions or smuggling operations. No. You think? A March report filed by a Florida grand jury stated clearly ORR is facilitating the forced migration, sale, and abuse of foreign children. Yes, they are. Adding that the process exposes children to horrifying health conditions, constant criminal threat, labor, and sex trafficking. Accurate. The grand jury concluded that an ORR worker was fired for reporting suspected trafficking in a case involving 100 children being sent to a single house in Texas after her superiors refused to look into it. How many times I gotta tell you guys, you want to take down this corrupt political system? Join us in the fight in the abolitionist movement against child and human trafficking. We don't care who the cases and the evidence lead us to. We will follow it through to the very bitter end, and we will make sure they are tried and sentenced for their crimes. Join us. Support us. Help us. For more information, head to our website, www.archangelministries91.com. Shameless plug. After these children are delivered to their quote-unquote sponsors by government contractors, ORR calls them after 30 days for a wellness check. It simply involves asking for verbal confirmation of the status of the child. A third of these calls, or 85,000, have gone unanswered since 2021, and no one ever follows up on it. Well, how about all the ones that say or give the verbal confirmation? How deep are you diving into the situation and the status of those children? I bet you're not. It's anybody's guess what happens to these children, but we know it often involves sex trafficking and forced labor. And with the Biden administration continuing to embrace open border policies, there will be a steady supply of children who can be victimized by child traffickers with help from the federal government for the foreseeable future. This is 100% true, 100% facts, 100% accurate. So, again, I ask you, please join us in the fight. And I will also say, giving all this wealth of information, the facts that we have proven, what we know for sure, who is the real domestic terrorist? Anyways, I will leave it at that. And as a closing statement, I will simply leave you with this.
There are, of course, those who do not want us to speak.
Let me think, just let me think.
In fact, even now, orders are being shouted into telephones, and men with guns will soon be on their way.
It's chances that...
Damn it! Why? Because while the truncheon may be used in lieu of conversation, words will always retain their power. Words offer the means to meaning, and for those who will listen, the enunciation of truth. And the truth is, there is something terribly wrong with this country, isn't there?
You designed it, sir. You wanted it foolproof. You told me every television in London.
Cruelty and injustice, intolerance and oppression. And where once you had the freedom to object, to think and speak as you saw fit, you now have censors and systems of surveillance coercing your conformity and soliciting your submission.
We need cameras.
How did this happen? Who's to blame? Well, certainly there are those who are more responsible than others, and they will be held accountable. But again, truth be told, if you're looking for the guilty, you need only look into a mirror.